How are we doing, friends? Welcome to part 2 of Unnamed campaign setting. Today we'll be talking about death. And not in a abstract way, but in a literal way. Also an abstract way, but definitely in a literal way. Then we'll be making a undead race, playable undead race called the Returned, based on the way that death works. And we will follow that up by starting some nations, the old nations. So these nations won't exist anymore when we get to the current time, but they are the original racially based nations of the older days. Their ruins can still be found all around the world. Man, this music is so loud. All right, give me a second. Alright, now I'm back, having dealt with Amore. And in the process, I also turned off my dehumidifier. So it might get a little bit more warm in here. Hopefully I'll be able to deal with that. Does anyone have any questions about anything from last time? I'll just give you all a minute here to weigh in before we get started talking about death and how it works. Alright, so no questions. Death. I think that the name of the god of death is literally just going to be death. And they aren't technically the god of death, so this is how it works. When you die, your soul gets judged by the Grand Cock, aka the god of light, and they make a binary decision. Either you have been a champion of good, or you have not. If you say yes, you go to the Grand Cock's realm, you live in what's essentially heaven. You say no, you get sent to the god of death. Well, not actually the god of death. You get sent to what's essentially a black hole. It's a void from which nothing ever escapes. Nothing ever will. And it makes a decision. Have you been a champion of evil or not? And if you say yes, then it essentially pulls your soul closer and closer towards it. As this happens, your understanding of time, the universe, and your crimes all begin to slow down until at some infinite point in the future you eventually reach death, the void, which never happens because it will never happen. But the closer you get, the slower things become. From your perspective, of course, things stay at a normal rate, but from the perspective of anyone observing you on the plane of death, you will become slower and slower. And that is why it's called the never and the nothing, because there's nothing there and nothing ever happens. So what is death then? The god of death doesn't really have a name. It doesn't choose it. It's essentially an avatar of this infinite void, in the same way that the original Titans in Greek mythology are kind of like avatars of chaos, absolute chaos and nothingness. Its job is to encourage the destruction of everything. So it is evil, and those who worship it are all crazy world-ending Satanists, basically. So being a cleric with the death domain is to be a bad person. So by gaining those powers, you essentially, you know, like, damn yourself. You will be doomed. But it's doubly bad for those who gain those powers, and this is why. Devils, demons, and fiends in this setting are all former clerics whose souls have been twisted into new forms and now serve. And while they might have something approximating language, they have no understanding of how mortality works anymore, and their job is to trick people into destroying things. So devils do it in a certain way. They attempt to make deals. Demons do it in a totally different way, where they just like the void. They just attempt to destroy everything in wantonness. They're never not actively destroying things, but they use language. Both of these races of creatures use language solely to trick people. There is no making a deal or gaining power from them that isn't advancing the cause of absolute evil. They'll tell you that it's not. They'll tell you it's for your own good. They'll try to convince you, oh, but you need this. You need vengeance, or where else are you going to get this grain? Or this person hurt your sister. Don't you want to get back at them? And that's how they get you. They don't actually care. They have no ability to care about these things. So now we know there's two binary choices. Do you go to good? If not, you go to the bad guy, and they say, are you bad? No? So what happens then? And this is how undeath works. If both god creatures reject you, then you return back to the realm. You return for 100 years and 10 days. That is how long you have to perform enough good deeds to be recognized by a cleric of the light, and essentially they'll hold a funeral service for you again, at which point you will die for real and you will ascend up to the realm of the Grand Cock. If you fail to do enough good deeds and be recognized, in 100 years and 10 days, you are destroyed permanently and thrown into the void forever. So I'm gonna make the race of the return here, but the first thing is that you keep many traits about your former life, but you are base human in look. All right, so like if you are X, Y, or Z race and you have green hair and blue eyes, you're still gonna have green hair and blue eyes when you're returned, but you're going to be a human. And if you're tall for your race, you'll be a tall human. Well, you'll be a tall returned. And it is because the returned are human that all the races know what a humanoid is. So all of the races have been classified by draconic scientists based on the basis of, this is a blank creature. They walk among us. We know that because when people die, they show up. And the second thing to note is that returned didn't come into existence until after the Great Rising. So it wasn't until the dragons became the stars in the night sky that the gods showed up, and that is when returns started happening. So people have no idea what happened to dead people before that time. People just died, and there was no one with enough planar intelligence. Only the dragons, who are now all stars, can answer that question. So let's figure out what would be important to a return. Probably constitution, so they're undead humanoid. And they can be targeted by the most negative effect of a spell targeting either of their racial traits. So if they are smited by a paladin, they count as an undead, and if they are hit by a spell that deals more damage to humanoid creatures, or a spell that requires a humanoid creature such as Charm Person, they count as a humanoid, not an undead, because an undead would require Charm Monster. So they bear the worst of both races in that regard. So most races in D&D get something like a +2 in one thing and a +1 in another. Not like every race, but most of them have something like that. There won't be any sub-races, so I'm gonna have to put all of the bonuses up front. I guess they could be kind of like the dwarves of this setting in terms of being very resilient. Try something like that. All right. But what else would undead be good at? So they're all, oh, I forgot to mention they were born with no memory. No memory of proper objects. They cannot remember their own family or emotional connections, but still remember what things are and where they are located. So if you're a lizard folk and you die and you come back as a returned, you remember the people that made up your family and you remember the location of things around you, but you don't understand why they were important. And let's say it's traditional for families to grieve and allow their returned family members to depart at pain of their immortal soul being killed, while being destroyed, essentially. So I think most return probably for the first couple of months of their existence. Their families kind of, if they die near their families are all like, oh no, you're dead now. Let's mourn you. But at some point, a life cleric shows up and is like, okay, you have to let them go. And the returned is like, yeah, that's right. I'm here, but I don't know who you people are. And once the connection is severed, it's encouraged for return to be sent out into the world to complete their mission, which is to do good, significant good. So another thing to note about returned is they don't all become adventurers, because that's not a thing. But many become monster slayers, hunters, charity-focused healers, and business people. Others enter government service. But you're not going to find a returned who's like, well, like me, staying at home, hiding in the darkness, trying to make sure that no one ever finds them. They are impelled by their very nature to try to find good things to do. All right, so let's talk about ability scores. Ability score increase. Constitution score increases by 2. Age. Appear to be the age they died at relative to human terms. They live for 100 years and 10 days. All right, so you might be wondering why the 10 days. In order to use a raise dead spell, someone has to have been dead for less than 10 days, which means returned in the process of being judged are judged over a 10-day period by the 2 gods. And at the end of that, if no one has tried to revive them, the judgment goes through and they come back as returned. If someone does raise debt on them, the judgment is delayed. So, to make up for those 10 days that they lost, they are given 10 extra days. And a 100 is a really good, you know, it's 10 tens. So I feel like 10 is considered a magic number, just like most of the other magic numbers we traditionally associate with. 3, I think in this setting, 8 is probably better than 7, if only because 8 represents the number of schools of magic. Correct me if I'm wrong on that, but I'm pretty sure there's 8 schools of magic. 10, always a solid number, you know, very good for quick mathematical counting in a metric way. What else do we have? Alignment. Returned always begin as neutral. Their life's goal is to be recognized as good aligned. Thanks, Farron. I believe so as well. Okay. Should return to have dark vision? No. About dark vision. What are some of the typical undeady things? Take a look at some undead creatures. Go with like whites. Whites are very thematically undeadish. Not big on sunlight sensitivity. Damage, resistance, necrotic. Okay. Caution. Actually super like that. Dark vision is also a thing. Alright. Alright, D&Ders. Is there some way that players could abuse being immune to exhaustion in order to make them ridiculously fucking powerful? Like something barbarian based or something along those lines? Or would giving these people immunity to exhaustion be a small but cool thing? Yeah, of course. You notice that I'm not here laughing about the Grand Cock. He's a very serious and upright, forthright rooster. He's the first and most powerful god. Why would you laugh at something like that? It's the Grand Cock. Berserk Barbarian would lose their main drawback. Interesting. What is that drawback? Barbarian. Path of the Berserker. Frenzy. When your rage ends, you suffer 1 level. That actually. I think I'm still okay with this. I mean, if I have a player who intentionally abuses it, I'm just gonna be like, hey, stop abusing this fuckhead. Okay, so dark vision, but darkness, get brave resilience. Necrotic and poison damage. Resistance to necrotic. Poison damage. Immune. Well. Ending endurance. Immunity to exhaustion. I like the idea of Returned is just being like people who never sleep ever, and they just toil at all times. Because that's the only drawback to not sleeping for them, would be exhaustion, but they don't suffer exhaustion. So these are some pretty good bonuses. I don't really want to give them anything else. Languages. Of their people in life. So you would get like Gammon and Furbolg, which will probably be Sylvan, I guess. What else I wanted to do with them? All right, so let's also talk about how other undead are formed. Non-returned undead. So there's several options here for how this works. First, someone uses evil magic on a dead body that has yet to reach its 10-day judgment. This is how you get basic undeads like zombies and skeletons. Undead evolve as they kill. So a skeleton kills a bunch of people and it becomes a better skeleton. A zombie kills a bunch of people and it starts to become a white. A white kills a bunch of people and it becomes whatever slightly better than a white. I'm pretty sure there's a thing that's like a white but slightly better. I just don't remember what it's called. But you get the idea. Undead continuously evolve into greater and greater forms as they kill. Second, someone uses magic to extend their own life vis-a-vis lichdom. So we're talking, if you want to rip your own living skin, organs, and tissue off and end up becoming chained to your own skeleton, that's another way to become undead that are not returned. Of course, as we all know, lichdom is evil. Super duper, duper evil. The third, virally. The zombie bite, vampire bite, or other magical plague. That's Plague. Plague sounds like a city in Europe, probably Poland. Plague is a thing that happens mostly in Europe, sometimes in Poland. Alright, so now we know about death. We know about the god of death, who's really just an avatar for the unending Voidmaw. And I think unending Voidmaw is it's a descriptive word, but most people just call it death. And I would think that the holy symbol for death is literally like a black sphere. Their avatar is the god of death, who has no form at all, and is assigned many titles, and does not refer to itself by anything. Few, if any, have ever contacted it and lived to tell the tale or report on it, because of course, the kind of person evil enough to ask the only kind of people that can cast spells to ask gods questions are clerics, and the only kind of clerics that are high enough level to ask the god of death questions are all insane world-ending fanatics. Not the kind of people who leave records around. So, is there anything I'm missing about Returned? I feel like this is solid, but I mean, its saving throws on advantage versus necromancy and poison and resistance to those things is pretty cool. The other thing I guess to recognize is that they can be targeted by turn undead. Because they are technically undead as well as humans. So partying with a cleric who wants to spam turn undead would be super annoying for them. Oh, I can't believe we're 25 minutes in. I only scheduled like another 20 minutes before. Do they get ancestry benefits from their previous life? The only ancestry benefit they receive mechanically is that they know the language of their people. The other thing that they get is they still maintain place memories, but not emotional connections to them. They remember the place they were born, worked, and lived in. How will that work if they are a cleric? Well, if they're a cleric, they should probably not use Turn Undead. That's how it would work. I mean, Turn Undead is just one function of channeling. All clerics get it, but they also almost all get an extra thing. Suppose they could suicide bomb themselves. No, that would be ridiculous. I would think it would simply be that, and it should probably be explicitly stated, returned clerics cannot use the Turn Undead function of Channel Divinity. If you want to be undead, you have to take some penalties. Can't do some of the cool stuff other people can normally do. Alright, let's talk about national environments for each race. We're going to start with the cool people, the lizard folk. Alright, so lizard folk live in mud flats. I think they're called mud flats. Let me look it up real quick. I'm thinking of some sort of Vietnam, Japanese coastal aesthetic type deal. I'm looking for coastal wetlands that form intertidal areas. Yep, that's exactly what I'm looking for. Alright, they live in mudflats. They formed a non-city community. So they have no major cities, but dozens of town-sized communities, often closely interlinked. If you recall, lizard folk in this setting believe strongly in community. They think that the community of the self is the most important, how you treat yourself, then your family, your town, and then the entire nation, and then the entire world. And so you have to serve all of these things. You start by serving yourself, and the second thing you serve is your family, or as the Godfather would say, a man who doesn't spend time with his family is not a real man. So they don't form large enough units. First off, the place they live can't support a city like that made out of stone because they live in the mud along the coastline. But the second thing to note is that these places are temperate. All year round, it's roughly a warm, foggy temperature. So it's kind of like a warmer version of Great Britain. Whatever world map I end up making, there will be some sort of weather system pattern that continuously forces warm air up to where they're at, warms up the mud around them so that they can take mud baths and do mud things. Lizard folk, you know, they seek to become the best of everything, and I think that philosophy and ethics are very big for them. So like encasing yourself in mud on your free time and just thinking about things, or floating in the warm, slightly brackish water. Well, brackish is when fresh water and salt water meet and make something that's not as good as either of those things. Yes, the lizard folk also do not refer to themselves in first person unless they have received that honor from the community. So they have to undergo a ritual. I kind of took that from Star Wars. There's a race that has that, and that race is called I'm looking it up. I'll get there. Gand. Yes. See, look. Cornhorn's Wingmate was a Gand. Correct. I, Jedi is one of the greatest books of the Star Wars saga. Specifically because it displays the dark side in a way that's actually simultaneously realistic and terrifying. Yeah, so they need to undergo a ceremony in order to recognize this. So I think that their level of technology is quite low. Also, their level of civics in terms of like higher levels of government, forming an army, all of these are quite low, but they individually have many skilled in people. So it's not like they have thousands of lizard folk at the time forming a standing guard, but they're going to have dozens and dozens, perhaps hundreds of expert hunters, expert trappers, expert monster slayers, expert, you know, this, that, and the next thing, who would form together. Now, this, of course, means that they have almost no understanding of, like, discipline and tactics, but they are trained since birth that community and working together are important. So again, no real standing army or the ability to do that. And I think that in what one would call a regular military engagement, they would get completely stomped on. Like if they approached a guy, an army of shield wall, you know, phalanxes, they would get utterly rolled. But if they fight, you know, in the mud flats, if they fight in the rivers, if they, you know, bounce out of rivers, if they fight in forests near their area, they're going to absolutely decimate you just based on individual skill level. But in a battle of attrition, they're going to get wrecked. They simply don't have the sort of higher, I don't want to say capacity, understanding perhaps. I mean, civics, I don't, let's say understanding. I'm looking for a word here, and I know what the word is, I just can't remember it. So let's say that, not population capacity, I'm thinking, how would one term one's base of knowledge in terms of like the structure of government, the structure of a military? They just don't have the experience and the knowledge to run such things. They don't exist in this society. You know, they can't run an army because they've never had an army. Doctrine. Doctrine's a pretty good word. I'll take that. You know, this isn't China, right? No matter where you're looking at throughout the history of wars in China, you're always going to find a highly functional bureaucracy is a great word. They lack an understanding of bureaucracy. It doesn't make sense to them. All right. I don't know who to go to next. Okay, so returned. Probably, they didn't form a nation, so let's put a dot there. So returned instead set out into the world and fought monsters and tried to do good deeds as soon as they started appearing. So they didn't form a nation because that's against the kind of things that they need to do in order to return. Dragonborn, where did you live, Dragonborn friends? Let's take a look at Dragonborn and see what their entry gives them a good... I think the thing about Dragonborn is that they are highly based on their ancestry, but they must have some common things. You have resistance to the thing. They're always extreme. No one tells the return their new mission. They have to make it themselves. They instinctively understand that they must perform a good, not just one, but enough good deeds to be recognized. However, they don't know how to do them. So they have to seek out an understanding of like, all right, well, I know how to kill people, so I'm going to become a monster hunter, or, you know, I'll become a mercenary, but work for good, or I must have known about business in my past life, so I'm going to start an orphanage or a charity, or this, that, and the next thing. I guess we'll leave Dragonborn for last, because their ancestry makes them so malleable that I can say whatever special environmental type remains for them. I guess orcs are almost certainly going to be based in the mountains and in caves, because if I'm recalling, orcs, let's see, they have dark vision. Do they have anything that makes them bad in daylight? No, so they're just really strong and powerful. They're really big. They can see in dim light, darkness. So I think orcs probably took to the mountains. Maybe they'll become like the dwarves of this setting. So the Orcish nation based under the mountains for thousands of years. The orcs alone held off subterranean, that's not how you spell subterranean, terranean threats to the surface. They established a strong hierarchical meritocracy. Strength is highly emphasized. All orcs in this society underwent military service. Voluntary, well, involuntary military service. Ooh, that's not how you spell military. You're correct, Ratosaurus, and I'll tell you why. Your Ascope crosswalk will be used later, but not for these nations. I do not require a deep understanding of these because these are the old country. This is the first generation, technically second generation ruins, but these countries no longer exist. The Ascope crosswalk will be used solely for the current generation, the fourth age countries, which will be based on the ruins of the old places. The boomers, well, I prefer to think of them as the silent generation, but sure. We just got done talking about lizard folk and the new playable undead race that returned. So if you missed that, then you missed it. What else can I say about orcs? Yes, this is the third age. This is the age of race. So each of the environments we're talking about are when the races were freed, if you see it that way, but once they no longer had the dragons to provide administration and unity, they all formed up into racial groups and divided the continents up and said, we'll live here because this works for us. And everybody just went their separate ways, and that is what we're setting up. Where were all of the old countries at? I don't know how much I want to make orcs like traditional dwarves in this setting. I want them to be underground. I don't want them to be like Lord of the Rings orcs. They're not unintelligent savages, but they are very large, very aggressive and powerful and militant, because all of those things play to orc traits in Volo's Guide to Monsters. So I think maybe they aren't like craftsmen, but they are a highly organized, not sophisticated government, but militant. Now we know that there was a war between the kobolds and the goblins, so let's take a look at kobold and goblin traits. Kobolds, they're pretty good working together. They aren't good in sunlight. They have sunlight sensitivity. Interesting. So I feel like maybe they live in foothills, or in dark like maybe like foothills near a series of dark forests. Oh, the goblins took the forests, and the kobolds took the foothills, and then the two races start smacking against each other. All right, I like that. What does D&D have to say about hobgoblins? Are they literally just... They're listed as a different race, but are they just ascended goblins, or... Hobgoblin. Hobgoblins. That tells me nothing. Desert, forest, grassland, hill. Alright, not bad, not bad. Okay. You want to know more about hobgoblins? Is there another hobgoblin article? Hobgoblin races. Ooh, here we go. Seem to be quite different from rank. Alright, so we'll assume that they're two different races. Perhaps they share a similar ancestry in the past. Alright, so goblins live in a sort of dark forest. They make caves and interesting inventions. Their short lifespans and rapid repopulation means that they are very good at innovation. So they're constantly having to come up with new stuff because their society is always under pressure. Pushing down on me, and it's pushing down on you. Under pressure. Bugbear, not bugbear. Where were we? Kobolds. Foothill caves near the mountains. So it sounds like goblins, kobolds, orcs, and hobgoblins all live on the same continent and probably within the same geographical region. Hill caves near the mountains. What else can I say about it? Their drive to serve dragons caused them to invade others' lands in search of their sovereigns. We haven't talked a lot about this, but the surviving dragon eggs from when the dragons rose into the sky became the sovereign dragons. The dragons were so happy that everyone didn't butcher and eat them that whatever city they ended up in, they were like, we will protect this city with our lives for all eternity. That doesn't mean that they get involved in mortal affairs like wars and stuff, but they layer near enough to the town that like the layer effect of like a blue dragon, I think, is continual sandstorms. So wherever blue dragons layer, you can see the sandstorm from the town. And major events like massive flooding, or tornadoes, or something, a plague, any existential threat to the city, not involved in like rulership. They don't get involved in the day-to-day affairs, and they don't step in to stop wars. But if the people of the city are under threat by some sort of existential threat, sovereign dragons will attempt to use magic and their draconic abilities. At this point, in the Fourth Age, all of the sovereign dragons that remain are all like super ancient. They're all the highest level of dragon possible because they've had like 10,000 years to age. They're essentially not to be fucked with, but you pretty much only see them like once every 100 years. Hobgoblins. Planes. Oh, you know, we forgot to talk about what kobold governance is like. What is kobold governance like? Probably those who have the best understanding of draconicness. So they they probably have extreme bureaucracy. Those who display the best knowledge and understanding of draconicness, dragons, language, and civics stand above the rest. I just like the idea of like a little kobold sitting at a little desk with a little candlelight next to him, and he's got like a pen and he's filling out his government service test. And he's just like, was it Gragnok the Gold, or was it Barlon the devastating black carapace that destroyed the town of Loxleyville? Which one of these two dragons, you know? And he like licks the end of his pen and dips it into the ink. This is how goblins get promoted in societal ranks. Lots of paperwork everywhere. Somebody shouting, you know, I did my thesis paper on this dragon. I should be allowed to do X, Y, and Z. All right, so hobgoblins, they live on the plains. Formed one of the 3 great Monster Slayer cities. So it's one of the great cities of the world. Was formed by hobgoblins. They moved up to the plains next to the land of monsters, abominations, and stuff, and they're just like, all right, well, nobody else is gonna stop these motherfuckers, so it's time for us to get in. Hooah! And everyone's like, hooah, sir! I got my supply of crayons right here. Yes, all hobgoblins are United States Marines. That's just canon now. Militocracy. I don't think I spelled that right, but that's fine. Militocracy. And so they're ruled by like the great generals. Where, probably they get, what are they called? Dependopotamuses. Your family co-ops your rank. So if you're, you know, like a sergeant, your family is treated as if they are the rank of sergeant wherever they go in town. Oh, you probably like wear your rank on all of your clothes. Even your family does too. Like they get caps with your rank on it. Yeah. That's my understanding of hobgoblins now. I kind of like this. It makes for good adventure. Slight ridiculousness, good adventure. I might keep that crayon thing in too. All right, what else we got? Bugbears. What are bugbears good at? Bugbears endure a harsh existence that allows them to remain self-sufficient. They're long-lived, powerful, sneaky. They have dark vision. What else do we have to say about bugbears? That's not it. That's bugbear race. I don't like this shiftless savage. They tell us about where they live. Alright, so let's look at bugbear and see what they're... Forest, grasslands, and underdark. Alright. I'm gonna say bugbears have their own island. Island nation, separate from other races. They are masters of coastal warfare. They're kind of like Scotland, I guess. Scotland, bugbear society forms family-tied clans which all vie for control of council. All the bugbears, you know, they're really good at doing like shallow lake-like combat around the shores of their island. The island has a big mountain on it. The mountain has a series of underground caves. It connects to a different cave system than the orcs, but there's still monsters down there, so the bugbears have to go down and kill them. Bugbears are really good at like stealth and attacking and meleeing, so this works out really great for them. Bugbear pirates, I'm gonna put that down here. Alright, that's 100% going into the 4th age. Tabaxi. Where are Tabaxi anyway? I don't know what book they're in. I thought they were in Volos. Tabaxi. What do these guys got? Wandering, mercurial, tinkers, and minstrels. Perception, stealth, climbing. I kind of want to make them sort of how do I put this, like the hidden temples in cultivation novels from like Southeast Asian persuasions. Like they climb on the side of mountains to get up to hidden temples of knowledge where they, you know, like bards create bard colleges, and monks look at physical interactions, like they study the body of different creatures in order to like disable them. So they live in like, I don't even know how to describe it, high mountain paradises, I guess, like plateaus on top of mountains. Schools of learning, bard colleges. So probably Tabaxi live on a different continent than the bugbear, goblin, hobgoblin, kobold, orc. So I guess continent 1. Goblin, hobgoblin, orc, kobold. What am I missing? No, I think that covers it. We've got Island 1, which is bugbears. Continent 2, which has Tabaxi. My notes are not the greatest organized right now. Oh, we forgot lizard folk. Probably, let's say lizard folk live on the same continent, because they're also kind of monkish in some ways. They do a lot of philosophy stuff. So they live on the mud flats along the coastline. You know, these are the lizard folk are the people that farm rice and sugar cane. They catch fish. Because they don't form large cities and supermassive communities, they probably don't have a lot, like their crop overgrowth is not super duper massive like we would have nowadays, but they have enough food to get by. Food is not a problem for them. I wonder if maybe the Tritons and the lizard folk have a close relationship based on the Tritons living right up on a shoreline, right? What do I know about Tritons? Must be somewhere here in this book. Volo's Tritons. I also removed Azamar and Tiefling because I didn't think that they worked with the new way that good and evil and the planes, the upper planes, worked. So they are no longer a part of this setting on the monster race continent. They probably exist in a different form over with the traditional D&D race continent. Tritons, aquatic crusaders, so they live underwater, right? I don't actually know that much about their abilities. Wow, they live super long. They're strong. Speak primordial. Wow, that's heckin'. Resistance to cold damage. They have an affinity for people and beasts. Control air and water. Wall of water. Interesting. Live in massive kingdoms, organized in a sort of medieval. That's spelled totally wrong. I still don't know that it's spelled correctly. European feudal society along the coastline and deep ocean near the lizard folk. They're only trading partners and word to the outside world. I like the idea that Triton society eventually spreads between Continent 1 and Continent 2. Like, they have a series of outposts so that one could travel from one continent to another underwater at those outposts. Well, you know, like only Tritons and people with breathe underwater capability could do it, but I think that all coastal cities in the Fourth Age are going to be kind of like, how do I say this? So if you don't live in America, you might be surprised to find out that we're one of the few countries that has wheelchair or ramp access to almost all of our buildings. We mandated it at a national level and we enacted it, and so it's in our building codes at pretty much every level. You're not going to find that almost everywhere else in the world. It's pretty tough. So I think that all of the cities along the coastline around the world have a sort of, at the very least along their actual literal coast, a sort of canal system to allow Tritons to enter into the city in a way that they're comfortable and interact with locals and ship goods either on or under the water in and out of the city. Access is controlled in the same way that one would control literal naval access. I mean, I don't know that they have ramps. That's not what I'm trying to say. They probably have ladders and steps in and out of the water so that Tritons can easily move between the two. But it indicates here that Tritons don't like being on the surface because they don't understand it. The key to the story I'm telling isn't that Tritons get ramps, but that Tritons get canals. People make canals to encourage Triton traders to bring their underwater wares to them. You know, like manatees would be kind of like their horses or something along those lines, and they would drag sacks or carts, underwater carts, I guess, of goods into the town. They'd get through a checkpoint that would be just like a naval checkpoint, so, you know, like a giant underwater iron curtain to block movement. The curtain would be lowered and raised at different times of the day. People would be let in, an inspector would inspect their goods, and then they'd swim along into town and then like sell it to people along the coastline. So I think that makes Triton's really interesting and unique. I think I'm almost ready to call it on here. It's been exactly an hour. So let me look at my schedule and determine when's the next time I can do this. We'll probably wrap up races then. Looking for the ancestral homelands of the Dragonborn, the Tenku, the Goliath, and the Furbolg. Although I'm pretty sure Furbolg live in the Fortis. They'll probably live on the Fortis subcontinent too, which is where cool people that aren't super hard into war live. Schedule. I don't remember how to find my own schedule. Pretty sure it's on my Twitch page. Take a look. Yes, I have a thing for schedule. What do I have this week? I don't have anything Monday. 31st. Let's schedule in campaign setting part 3. Okay, I'm gonna leave this on returned so that anyone that missed it, like Rad, can take a look at it while I ask our local civilians here, viewers, I guess I should say, if you have any questions about the setting or for me, and then in the next couple minutes I'm going to switch over and we're going to do Sea of Thieves.